everyone, I hope you're doing well. My name is Katie and I post book-related videos every single Wednesday, and today's video is going to be the second video, and there's some fuzz flying on my face. Today's video is going to be the second video in my series called Psych Pop, or Pop Psych, whichever one doesn't already have copyright on it. But about a month ago I posted my first video where I talked about the miracle morning and the effects of waking up at 5 a.m. every day. But I just wanted to say thank you guys, because I was nervous how well that would go over since it's different from what I normally talk about. But the feedback was huge and really positive, so I just want to say thanks again. So a week ago on Twitter I asked you guys which psych topic you guys wanted me to talk about next, and overwhelmingly it was about introversion. And now I said I was going to talk about introversion and leadership, which is exactly in line with really what I study, because I'm getting my master's in industrial organizational psychology, so basically business work psychology, just improving the workplace. But after I said I was going to make a video about this, there was actually a ton of really good discussion on Twitter from a bunch of people who follow my videos, a bunch of booktubers, basically just a lot of people across the board who are introverts, and we're talking about how annoyed they get from misconceptions surrounding this personality type. So that's gonna kind of be the focus of this video today. So when people commonly think about introversion and extroversion, for introverts, words that tend to come to mind to people are quiet, shy, insecure, hate people. In contrast that with extroversion, people tend to picture people who are super loud, who are incredibly confident and outgoing, and both of those characteristics surrounding those two personality types do not define them whatsoever. The most straightforward way to look at introversion and extroversion is how you gain your energy. So introverts tend to lose energy the more they're around, especially large groups of people, and extroverts tend to gain a lot of energy the more that they're around other people. So picture yourself, it's Friday and you just finished finals week, or say you work full-time and you just finished Hell Week. Is the way that you're gonna get back to feeling like yourself to go home and watch some TV shows alone? Is that gonna kind of restore you mentally and emotionally? Or is, say, going out to a bar with a larger group of friends gonna get you more back to feeling like yourself? So when it comes down to it, I think that's the best way to look at this personality characteristics. And I think when people used to talk about this, say like 10, 15 years ago, the word introversion wasn't brought up very much at large. People would just say, oh, you're really quiet, you're really shy. Now, some people might argue and say that things have improved for introverts lately because it's just a word that people are using a lot more often. I would agree partially that it's something people are more aware of, but I think there's still so much confusion about what introversion and extroversion is. And I think a lot of those bad stereotypes that now people have surrounding introverts are being kind of perpetuated by introverts, or even by people who aren't introverts but who like to think that they are. Now, I don't want to be negative, but when I see people talking about introversion, it's mainly these days on places like Tumblr where people are saying, oh, I'm an introvert, and they picture them with glasses that they probably don't even need, and they're saying, oh, I'm an introvert, so I'm so hashtag quirky, I'm hashtag unique, I hate people. I'm not trying to yell at you, but if you're one of those people who like to post those types of things or think that way or just share it, please stop. When it comes down to it, introversion and extroversion really just has to do mainly with that energy factor I was talking about. Now, there can be some overlap. Often people who are introverted are shy, but for example, I rate really, really highly on introversion whenever I take any kind of valid personality assessment, but I'm also not shy. I'll also admit I love going out to bars, albeit not super frequently, because again, if I did that every single night, one, I would fail out of grad school, but two, it can be just kind of draining for me. But I love going out to bars and places with my friends, say 1 to 2 times a week. And as much as I hate to say it, being an introvert doesn't make you super special, because a third of people are extroverts, a third of people are ambiverts, basically kind of in the middle. They have a lot of characteristics from each, and a third of people are introverts. So there's nothing super special about being within one of those 3 personality traits. And on the flip side of that, you could be an extrovert and also be incredibly shy. Maybe you don't like to talk very much, but you just like to be out with a big group of friends because it kind of energizes you. Now I am going to get a little bit into that topic of leadership and introversion because I think this is super interesting. And when I get into this, I don't want it to sound like I'm bashing extroverts whatsoever, but let's be honest, particularly if you live in the US and you're an extrovert, you kind of honestly already have a little bit of a leg up, and I'll get into why. So I think it's important to highlight some of the strengths that introverts have in terms of leadership, because a lot of people just aren't aware of any of this. I also would be be curious to hear if you guys are from outside of the US. For leadership or just positive personality traits, is it an introvert or extrovert that's kind of the ideal in your country? So now I'm gonna go ahead and talk about some characteristics of introverts that tend to lend themselves to being fantastic leaders. So first, introverts tend to have much higher levels of sensitivity than extroverts. When I say sensitivity, I don't mean that if someone says something mean to me, I'm more likely to cry. But what I mean is that introverts tend to be incredibly aware of their social surroundings, the emotions of the people around them, so they tend to be able to connect one-on-one with the people they're leading, include the ideas of their followers, things like that. Introverts also tend to actually have higher levels of creativity and higher levels of independence. They have a tendency to think before they act, include the ideas of others, and they also tend to not be interested in dominating social situations just for the sake of it. So say you're at a round table with executives, an introvert isn't just going to talk for the sake of it. They're going to talk when they feel like they have something valid to say that's actually going to improve the conversation. One study that was also really interesting showed that at work, introverts can adapt and pretend to be extroverts quite effectively. However, with the flip side, extroverts don't tend to adapt well when they have to be introverts at their job. So say you have a job where it's at a desk, doesn't involve a lot of communication with other people. Extroverted people tend to not be able to adapt to those situations very well. So I just went through the pros, but the rub for all of this and for why introverts tend to often not be viewed as leaders is a lot of research has shown that simply the more that you talk, the more people are going to view you as intelligent, and the more that you talk, the more people are likely to view you as a leader. So say let's picture that executive meeting that I was just talking about. I was saying it's actually a great thing that an introvert isn't just going to be talking for the sake of, filling the silence or dominating the conversation. Now, of course, I view that as a good thing, but what the research shows time and time again is if an introvert isn't talking more, people aren't going to view them as intelligent, and people often are going to view them as a leader. So this is one of those situations where I think it's a bit naive to say that you can just be your super introverted self all the time. I just think that's kind of naive, and I think it is important sometimes to just adapt to whatever social situation you're in. Now, of course, that's not to say that you should be fake, but say you have an exec meeting where it's going to be 2 hours long, filled with a ton of people, and you're going to feel drained. Maybe take 10 minutes prior to that to go be alone and kind of reboot, and then come into that conversation understanding that, yeah, you probably should talk a little bit more than maybe you care to, just so that people understand that you are there and you have something valid that you need to say. I also do think that even though there are so many misconceptions, often negative ones, surrounding this personality trait, just the fact that it's being talked about so much more is really helpful. Because, for example, for the past 10 years or so, whenever you picture like hip new workplaces, they're always that giant open floor plan where everyone's working huddled at desks and there are fucking ping pong tables everywhere, and it just says collaboration up on top of the website. Now, of course, teamwork is incredibly important, and being an extrovert or introvert doesn't mean that either party is going to work better as a team. I need to take a break, my foot just fell asleep. Now, of course, being an effective team player is important. Extroverts have a leg up in the terms that they really like to be around other people and it energizes them, but introverts have a leg up in the fact that they're more likely to listen to and be attentive to the opinions of everybody on the team. However, because a lot of this research is coming out saying, look, a third of people are extroverts, a third are ambiverts, and a third are introverts, our workplaces shouldn't all look like that because this is just helpful for extroverts. Workplaces should have places, of course, where we can work as a team, but they should also have workspaces where people can be alone. A lot of research has also come out, and I think this is really interesting, that there's a direct negative correlation between the amount of people working on a project and the overall quality of that product in the end. Meaning that if you have 10 people working on a project and then 3 people working on that same project, that 3-person team is much more likely to have a higher quality product in the end. Now, I thought I would end this video with just a couple of tips because I did get some questions from you guys on Twitter about, say, how do I interact when I go to a conference and I have to network with a bunch of people, things like that. Now, I will just say I'm a student, I'm not an expert in this field, but I did get some really good advice once, so I thought I would go ahead and share this with you guys. But if you're gonna be in a social situation with a large group of people and you're worried that you're just gonna feel drained and after a couple hours of being there, you're not gonna wanna be there anymore. Now what I've heard, and I definitely agree, is to get to that event just a slightly bit early so that way there's gonna be a smaller amount of people. So that way you can interact with that smaller group of people, which is what introverts tend to like more. Introverts don't tend to love massive groups that involve tons of small talk over and over again. They prefer deeper conversations kind of right off the bat, and that's more likely to happen in a much smaller group. So just get to that event a little bit early. You can apply that advice to other social situations as well. well. Although please don't be that asshole who shows up to a party 20 minutes early because hosts hate that. But I do think that advice for something like a conference or just a networking event is very helpful. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Now, personality psychology is my personal favorite area of psychology, and I could talk about it for hours. So this was just one tiny piece of this. Also link some wonderful videos and articles on introversion down below. Please let me know which video you would like to see next in my Psych Pop / Pop Psych series, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.